Thanks. 3 and 3. Minister, I'd like to welcome you very much to the House. Thank you for coming in here and thank the Leader for organising this emergency debate, and to thank you also for your strong words of outrage and indeed for disclosing to us the very positive news that the Senior Council's report is to be published. I think all of us who watched RTÉ Primetime programme last Thursday were utterly shocked and outraged on behalf of the families and the children whose privacy and whose trust in the state was so grievously impaired by the disclosures in that programme. And commendation is due to Conor Ryan, the journalist, and indeed to Shane Core, the very brave whistleblower. You know, these are families who've been dealt with by the state with contempt, with a lack of compassion, who've seen enormous waiting lists, who are exhausted trying to fight for the rights of their children. The As I Am organisation expressed it as very succinctly, saying that the programme disclosed a grievous breach of privacy and trust for families who've already gone through so much. And I'm grateful to As I Am and to others for sharing their views in the wake of the programme with me. And indeed, I'm grateful to Roisin Costello, who wrote such a clear piece in today's Irish Times, setting out clearly the legal context and the key issues here, namely the lack of knowledge and consent of the parents for the sharing of this highly confidential and sensitive information. I know the Data Protection Commissioner is already reviewing it. I know the Minister's ordered the audit, and I'm very glad that we will see, I hope we will all see the Senior Council's report. And again, like other colleagues, Minister, you might just clarify if publication of the report means publication more generally or just to the Health Committee. But I think that we do need to see further inquiries being made, and it may be that ultimately a public inquiry is warranted. It's clear that there's been breaches, or it appears clear, sorry, until we know more we can't be absolutely sure, but it appears clear there was breaches of medical ethics in the sharing of patient information without their consent. It also appears there was sharing of sensitive and confidential educational information, namely school reports, again without consent of parents and children. So the Medical Council may have a role here, and indeed governance bodies for schools and for teachers may well have a role in investigating those breaches of professional ethics, because clearly there are issues here for quite a number of settings for disclosure of information without consent. I know the Oireachtas Health Committee has asked a series of 7 key questions, and our colleague Senator Annie Hoey sits on that committee for Labour, and I think we'd all very much hope that the Health Committee will be facilitated in holding the hearings that Senator Conway has described them as seeking next week. And indeed, I think we would all very much wish to see the 7 questions they've raised answered. I think the first question relates specifically to the publication of the Senior Council report, so that may well now be dealt with. But it's very important that we know in particular the extent to which so many individuals, it appears, according to Shane Core, had access to this sensitive information, and we also need to know whether there is more disclosure of sensitive information that we don't know about that has also gone on within the department. So I thank you again for coming in to us, Minister, and I hand over to Senator Sherlock.
Yeah, thank you.
And Minister, I want to sincerely thank you for coming into the House today as well, and for making your very comprehensive statement, and to join Senator Batchick in welcoming your statement with regards to the publication of the Senior Council's report. Like so many others, I was horrified, and I think the thing about what we learned in the RTÉ Investigates programme, but we have to keep on reminding ourselves here that at the heart of all this are families with some of the most vulnerable children in this state. Families who are simply trying to vindicate their children's constitutional and essential right to education and appropriate education in this country. And yet we heard an account where the Department of Health has actually chosen to expend valuable time, money and resources into an intelligence gathering exercise, not just on the children, but on the families of the children at the centre of these cases. And you know, we use the phrase the state. The state is a very broad term. I'm sure there are hundreds of workers in the Department of Health, in our health services, who are day in, day out trying to do their very best to try and deliver services to these most vulnerable of children. It must be an awful kick in the teeth to those workers to see the activities of the litigation unit within the Department of Health. And I suppose in the short time that I have available, you know, Minister, you raised some of the questions, and Senator Batchick talked about the 7 questions that do need to be answered now. But ultimately they boil down to why was the department gathering this intelligence, and to what use was it precisely putting that information? And again, going back to that point, that it was not just about the child, but about the family. And Minister, you talked about trust, and ultimately the issue here is about culture, a culture within government departments, that if you go up against a government department, you do so at your peril, because there are serious questions about why a litigation unit would want to be gathering information on a family member's alcoholism, obesity and overall mental state. And they were only some of the references that we saw in the programme on Thursday night. I suppose ultimately we owe a huge debt of gratitude to the whistleblower Shane Carr, to the RTÉ Investigates programme and to Conor Ryan for bringing this to light. But ultimately, the government now need to move swiftly, because this isn't just about the families concerned. This is about trust in the institutions of the state. And I made the reference here on Friday in the Shannon, and it needs to be repeated here. We have a huge challenge to the legitimacy of the state at this point in time from the far right. People who do not want to believe in the institutions of our state. And if we have revelations such as what we learned last week coming out time and again about the activities of our state and the use of that information, and of course the big issue here is what were they going to do with that information? We know the state, institutions of the state have previously used information about persons to undermine a person's case. We saw it in the case of a child with regard, whose family was threatened with deportation a number of years ago. And so we need to clean up the act of government departments so that we restore trust in the institutions of the state.